And Brandon, we're going to move right along into the South Carolina Gamecocks. And I want to do something differently for the Gamecocks. And the first two teams that we've previewed thus far, we've looked at the offense and the defense, or something with the actual team on the field. I want to start this little preview for this podcast off with the schedule, because the thing with the Gamecocks schedule this year to me is they start the season against a tough opponent. They end the season against a very tough opponent. And then I think in the middle, they have about half a dozen games that could be toss-up games and could go either way depending on how you are thinking of things. And my big thing is I look at their first game, NC State. It's a neutral site game. This is going to be a tough game only in the sense of it's a tougher opponent than some of the games on your schedule. Tougher than Vanderbilt. I would say tougher than Mizzou. Tougher than Kentucky. If they can get, to me, I look at this, if they can get a win, a solid win on a neutral site against NC State, against the quarterback that we talked about for NC State that's looking to build on another good year, I think that if they set the tone in game one, it could, I know we mentioned that momentum doesn't usually carry over, not all the time, but it could set the tone for this season, and those toss-up games could turn into wins over losses for the Gamecocks in 2017.
I think you're right, and I think that, one big thing for them is they don't play Alabama, they don't play LSU, they don't play Auburn.
They don't play the big three.
And those are huge games to avoid, but they have their season bookended by two ACC teams in NC State and Clemson. And I know it's not the same Clemson team.
Still
We've talked about that, but it's still Clemson. And, what's so funny is that you just think to just a couple of years ago, and it doesn't seem like too terribly long, but at the same time it does, so that didn't really make sense. But to the Steve Spurrier days where, gosh, South Carolina, we weren't talking about them in the cellar, we were talking about them at the top of that SEC East division. And, Will Muschamp takes over, a guy who, is lauded for his good defense and his fantastic schemes and everything like that defensively, and that just did not happen last season so much. But I think you take a look at their schedule, and if they're able to beat NC State, if they could get Kentucky, LA Tech, Vandy, Wofford, so there's 5 wins. There's 5 wins. What did they have last year? 6? 6 wins last season. I think you already have a base there then if you can get those 5 wins. And yeah, all you did last season was win 6 games. So there's 5.
Name those 5 again, just so we get them on the record again.
I think I said NC State, Kentucky, LA Tech, Vandy, and Wofford. I'm
going to add one.
Okay.
Texas A&M. There's your 6.
You hate them so much.
I think they're taking a step back this year.
So there could be 6. NC State. I don't want to say it like, NC State easy one. No, they're not.
But if they could set that tone game one.
But yeah, if you are able to come out and win that first game against an ACC opponent in a formidable ACC team, they're not the top of the crop, but they're not the bottom feeders. I think that could be a really good way to start your season. And then you've got games like Mizzou. That's kind of one of those flip a coin, 50-50 games. That could be your 6. What about Arkansas? That could be 7. Bowl game. That could be 8. You have an 8-win season. That's 2 more than last year. You're looking a lot better than 6. It's looking a lot better than a 6-win season.
Besides the 5 games that you mentioned, the 2 that I look for and I look at, they're both road games, but Texas A&M and Tennessee, because those are 2 games where we talked about Texas A&M already. They're a team that is losing a little bit. Plus, this is a big year for Kevin Sumlin, because there are many that believe if he will. Based on
many,
his past,
one of the biggest ones is Ricky.
Well, I'm not the only one.
No,
I
am
am
not,
one of the biggest.
but
Physically, I'm one of the biggest. But I am not the only Kevin Sumlin hot seat generators.
No, you're
that
not.
are going
You're
around,
not.
but he is on the hot seat and deservedly so. But then also Tennessee. We haven't gotten to them yet, but they're a team losing their starting quarterback, losing their starting running back. This is a team who also has a coach that is usually on the hot seat each and every year and then doesn't get fired in Butch Jones, where I think Tennessee might even take a minor step back last year, which pains me to say because I visited Tennessee a year ago and I really liked their stadium. And I remember saying to Dave, we got to come down here to Rocky Top to partake in a football game one time.
But yet you were so against them last year,
Oh,
and you
yeah, no,
wanted
they got
them
lucky.
to
They got lucky
lose
many
each
times.
and every week.
Yeah,
we would
no.
be in the same studio, and they won again. They've got a
They got
horseshoe
lucky.
up their ass.
They did.
Blah blah blah.
They had a horseshoe rammed up there as far as you could go.
Pretty
That's
deep.
what happened. They should have lost against Appalachian State. I will never let that game go. But this South Carolina, the one player I look at for South Carolina is their quarterback in Jake Bentley, because he was a guy who last year threw 9 touchdowns, just over 1,400 yards, only 4 INTs. And this is a guy who I think if he takes a step forward with the offensive talent that he has surrounding him, most importantly, junior wide receiver Deebo Samuel, who is one of the most dynamic athletes in the SEC. I think if he can use the talent around him productively, this South Carolina team could be a team that is definitely finishing the highest out of Kentucky, Mizzou, and Vandy, but they could even finish maybe third in the division.
So, Ricky, let me give you two stats from last season that...
Two statistics
that really stand out to me.
Okay.
And the first one is the entire season, South Carolina was outscored in every quarter and in overtime. Outscored in every single one. That says something. You can't even score more points than an opponent in one quarter. No, outscored in every single one plus overtime. So you get royally screwed, double screwed. And then sacks for a guy who comes over, and Will Muschamp, who I said earlier is a defensive-minded guy. Opponents had 41 sacks for 268 yards total. South Carolina had 20 less sacks, 21 overall for 170 yards. That's it? You were only able to bring down the quarterback 21 times when you look at, I think, Alabama, who was the top defense in sacks with like 54. It's a huge gap. And I just, that's one thing that I don't understand, how you can be a defensive-minded guy, yet you don't do well so much defensively. But here's one thing that they need to do to be successful, is they need to be able to have a strong defense. And I think that what you need to do better is you need to have a better pass rush. I think that we all kind of understood that. But I think, too, is that what they will also need to do is they will need to make sure that their secondary is about as solid as it was last year. So they need that pass rush, but they need the guys at safety and corner to be solid and be able to come up with some big plays. They need those guys to be able to come up with some interceptions. You know, they returned some of the guys from last year in those positions, and they need to take that next step. It's mind-boggling to me that their defense isn't, some shining piece of their team. And we may get some commenters, I may get some commenters that tell me to go F myself, and that they are. Well, then your team really sucks then, because there's nothing really right now about this team that's screaming anything like woo to me. And maybe that's because South Carolina, ever since it's been that transition from Steve Spurrier, it hasn't seemed like it had that same spark. But I still think, though, we did it right at the beginning of those teams that they could beat. I think that you still could do that. I think that you still could do that. You have to take that next step defensively, and on offense. Jake Bentley has to be good for the entire season. Not just a half of it, and then maybe you would be able to have those wins.
Well, and that's the main reason why when we started this segment, why I wanted to start with the schedule, because the biggest plus that this team has is not any player on this team. It is not any side of the ball. It is something that is just pen and paper, basically, and it's the schedule. You said it earlier. They don't have to play Alabama. They don't have to play Auburn. They don't have to play LSU. They have avoided possibly three of the best teams in this conference. And yeah, you got to play Florida. Yeah, you got to play Georgia. I get it. They're in your division. But this team, I look at it, and I know we got one more left to go in Kentucky, but I feel like out of Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, and Vandy, it's basically going to be a dogfight between those four teams, jockeying for position. And the only thing that's going to change it is if Tennessee falls back and they make it 5. And it could be hey, here's Florida and Georgia at the top fighting for who's going to go to the SEC title game and maybe the college football playoff. And then the rest of the division just kind of jockeying for position, trying to get enough wins so that they can become bowl eligible and go to the postseason. But if there's any team in this division that has a favorable schedule, you got to look at the Gamecocks and say, if they just all they got to do is, even if they just take care of business in their own division, you beat Mizzou, you beat Kentucky, you beat Vandy, you beat Texas A&M and Tennessee. There's 6 games right there. Add NC State, there's 7. Add La Tech, that's 8. Add Warford, that's 9. If you could just take care of business in your division, in your conference, besides Florida and Georgia, you could easily have a 9-win season. That's why I think out of the bottom 5 in this conference, behind Georgia and Florida, don't be surprised, I'll say, if South Carolina turns games over, turns them into wins, and finishes 3rd in the division right behind Florida and Georgia.
Well, Ricky, I think that you've got a point there, and I think that there's going to be a lot of those games that are kind of the 50-50 games that could go either way. And I do want to make one more statement to wrap it up on my end, is that I said when I was talking earlier about the stat of the sacks, their opponents last year had 41, they only had 21, and people are going to say, well, that's a whole lot. That's a lot of sacks for them. No, don't just because you've had a bad pass rush for a very, very long time, and the 21 sacks is the most since 2013. Don't tell me that's good. It's not Jadeveon Clowney good of the 43 that they put up back in 2012. But I think that you never want to be okay with mediocrity, and you always want to be better, and you always want to continue to have be the best at all the positions. So I think that the pass rush is going to be number one to focus on for this defense, for the South Carolina defense. If they can just put some pressure on some of these quarterbacks and some of these running quarterbacks, guys who like to get out of the pocket, you kind of force them a little bit more to stay in that pocket and just be pinpoint accurate. And that's going to be something that we're going to, I think, hopefully see a little bit more of out of South Carolina this year.
Well, and this is where we're going to turn the conversation on to you guys. Let us know down below in the comment section, what do you guys see from South Carolina this year? And really their schedule, that's the one I'm going to harp on, is how many games do you see the Gamecocks winning in 2017? And do you even see their schedule as favorable? Or do you think that we are wrong and they're actually going to lose a ton of games? We might be overlooking some opponents. Let us know down below in the comment section.